and welcome to The Purposeful Creative. I'm your host, Arian Serafico. This podcast is designed to help creative individuals like you explore different ideas on how to build a career or business around your purpose and passion. Each week, I'll be sharing stories and conversations that are meant to spark new ideas, reframe existing mindsets, and challenge you to act so that you can get clearer on your own version of what purpose means to you. Because designing a meaningful life doesn't come with an easy-to-follow, one-size-fits-all roadmap. The key, I believe, is to approach it as a creative process in itself. And no matter where you are right now in that process, whether it's the beginning, middle, or you're feeling completely lost, this podcast is for you. Just a tiny disclaimer, this podcast has heavy undertones of design thinking, entrepreneurship, human-centered design, and unapologetic feminism. Do you dream of pursuing your passion and your purpose and making it something that's actually sustainable and profitable? If your answer is a resounding yes, then this episode is for you. Hello and welcome to episode number 5 of The Purposeful Creative. I'm your host, Arian Serafica, a teacher, creative entrepreneur, and design thinking advocate. I'm currently recording this podcast in the Philippines, and today is a special Q&A episode. I gathered 5 questions from listeners all about the topic of starting or running an online business and what that looks like in 2017. The reason that I am so passionate about the topic of entrepreneurship is because I really want to help more creatives take their passion and build businesses that make this world a better place. I want to help more entrepreneurs build businesses that are centered around purpose and helping others, all while keeping it sustainably profitable. I mean, that's my dream for myself, and I want to help more young people do that as well. So, in this episode, we have questions that range from branding and marketing to how to price your work or your products to how to run an online store in an efficient way, and also tools that you need when you're running an online business. So, I'll be mentioning a lot of resources in this episode, and if you want links to those, make sure to check out the show notes at thepurposefulcreative.com/episode 5. I promise there's lots of valuable links in there. Okay, let's dive straight into the questions. The first question is from Micah, and it's all about how to stand out on social media when you're just starting out. She asks,
Hi, my name is Micah and I'm starting arts and crafts business. So my question is, how can I attract or gain more viewers on my page? I mean, there's so much competition on social media these days. So I want to know how to get my brand out there. Should I have social media accounts on multiple platforms? Or should I interact with more people and let them know that I have a page? Thank you, and I hope you can give me some tips.
Thank you for your question, Micah. I know that growing your audience is tough, especially in this day and age where there's just so much content online. I think that it was much, much easier if you were launching something new about 5 or 6 years ago, because I feel like just in the past year or so, the content that's been on the internet is just way too overwhelming, way too noisy. So if you're launching now in 2017, it's going to be a lot more challenging than it was a few years ago, but it's not impossible to stand out. I think one of the things that you need to remember is that when you're branding or marketing or promoting your brand, it's not something that you do for 2 to 3 days or a week or 2 weeks and then expect to reap the benefits in the next few months. Growing your audience and sales is something that you do consistently and for the long haul. Like, you need a consistent strategy for it. It's not just a one-time thing or a one-week thing. So for me, fundamentally, beyond tips and tricks and tools, I think that the number one thing you need to get clear on first, if you're starting a project or a blog or a business in 2017, the thing that you need to get clear on first is the strong core message for your brand. Who are you? What do you sell? What value do you offer? And how do you tell that story uniquely? Because that strong core message should be at the heart of your marketing and sales strategy. If your core message is all over the place and you're trying to be everything to everyone and trying to cram all the words into your bio or the description of what you're trying to convey to people, then you will just confuse people. You will definitely fail in standing out online because your message is all over the place, and people will probably just see your brand on their feed and probably forget about it as one of the other 30 or 50 other brands they see every day online. So I know you asked whether it helps if you create several accounts on like different social media platforms, and I would greatly advise against doing that. I do see the value in sort of having a Facebook page, an Instagram page, a Twitter page if you want to. But one very concrete tip that I can give you is to pick your best social media platform and specialize in that. There are so many social media platforms right now, and it's very, very overwhelming to maintain everything, most especially if you're a solopreneur, you're a one-woman or one-man show. Now, what I want you to remember is that each platform has a different type of audience, and that audience behaves differently on each type of platform. So just because you posted this on Instagram doesn't mean you can just copy and paste the exact same thing on your Facebook page, because I really find that people behave differently on Facebook versus on Instagram. So for example, on Instagram, obviously people want pretty photos, pretty like lifestyle photos. And you have to sort of adapt your content for each platform. And that can get overwhelming, right? So that's why, especially if you're just starting out, it is so much wiser to pick one social media platform and really, really specialize and shine in that platform. So instead of trying to keep up with everything and doing lukewarm on each and eventually losing your sanity and productivity, just pick one social media platform and shine in that. Don't force yourself to use Instagram as your main platform if your specialty lies in videos. I mean, you can use YouTube or Facebook for that. Or, if your Instagram has a lot of followers, but it's not pushing sales of your products, but you see that your Facebook page is doing that, then give 80% of your energy on Facebook. So I'm not saying that you neglect your Instagram altogether, but if you see that between Instagram and Facebook is getting you more sales, then definitely focus your energy and your time more on Facebook. So for example, for me, I used to focus so much on Instagram, like I was so obsessed with increasing my followers, but as I was going through my business, I was really seeing that, there was much more results that I was getting on Facebook. So I've since directed most of my energies to Facebook. If you want to learn more about branding and marketing, and this is not just a shameless plug, but I really honestly recommend this class. I have an e-course called Purposeful Personal Branding, and it's really tailored for creative entrepreneurs and small business owners. And it's not just for personal brands. The reason that I use that title is because it's for entrepreneurs who have a lot of their personal identity and values tied into the brand that they're building. And I am very, very proud of the course that I created. I really put in so much great content in there. And I even give you like weekly challenges that you can try so that you can find out more about your brand. You can explore more about your audience, and you can have a structure, like a very organized structure for brainstorming about your brand so that your strategy isn't all over the place. My past students are extremely happy with it. I've had students who tripled their profits after taking the class and strengthening their brand, because strong branding is key to sales and marketing. I think that if you have a strong core brand, then you have a better understanding of how to market your business to your specific audience, and you're not just, posting and posting and posting on social media and just hearing crickets and being ignored because your core message is all over the place or non-existent. You can go to www.thepurposefulcreative.com/branding to check out the course and what's in it, what are the modules in it. If you think this podcast is valuable and the content that I provide here is valuable, I promise you the content in that course is so much richer, so much more detailed, and can give you so much more clarity and confidence about your brand. Okay, so Hopefully that helps, Micah. I don't think you should create a lot of social media accounts. I feel like you can just reserve your name for all the social media accounts, but really focus your energies on one, especially if you're just one person and you're just starting out. All right, so the second question is from Meekly, who wants to know what tools you need to invest in when you're starting and growing an online business. I really like this question. Meekly asks,
Hi, I'm Mickey from Stasha.org. Last year, I wrote and launched a book called I Love You, I Love Chicken Nuggets and Other Tales of Motherhood, or the Chicken Nugget Project for short. This year, I really want to grow. So my questions are, what are important things to invest on when you're starting out? And what are the next things to invest on when it's time to grow? I'm trying to keep my costs as scrappy as possible, but I'm wondering if there's anything important to invest in. Thank you!
okay, I was super excited to answer this question because I'm a big fan of tools and software that can help make my life easier and can help grow my business. But that's because I'm already 1 year into my business. Now, if you're just sort of in the stage where you're just testing out an idea, you're not yet sure you want to commit to it, you're just dipping your toes into the water, my number one advice is to try the idea out first with zero capital or the least amount of capital as possible. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is that they think that when they want to try out a business idea, they have to put in a large amount of capital, and that even becomes a roadblock for a lot of people. I talk all about that concept in the very first mini episode of this podcast. It comes right after episode number 3. The title of that episode is What to Do When You Don't Have a Lot of Money But Have a Lot of Passion. You can check it out in your podcasts app or your Stitcher app or on our website. But okay, let's say you're past that stage, you're past that trial stage, and you want to take your project more seriously and you're ready to start it as a legit business. And at this stage, probably, hopefully, you already have some initial money to invest into your business, right? So here are the tools that I recommend when you're just starting out, when you're in phase 1 of your business. The first thing is to invest in your domain name, which is a .com. So that's definitely one thing that I advise you to do because it just makes you look more legit. I know it's very tempting to just have an Instagram URL or a Facebook page, but really you need to reserve your .com as early as possible. Now, the second thing that I recommend is having a headquarters online. And by that, I mean having a website. Again, you can start off with just an Instagram page or a Facebook page in the beginning, but if you really want to be legit, do have an actual website for your brand or your business. And if you are looking into a website or a portfolio or a blog, there are 2 tools that I would recommend. The first one is Squarespace. For me, Squarespace is the easiest way to launch a website or a blog. A lot of it is just drag and drop. I use it for 2 of my sites, which is arianserafico.com and bravergoals.com. But if you're a little bit more advanced, if you know a little bit of HTML and CSS and you're a little bit more techie, I would recommend going for WordPress if that's more your jam. But it does take a little bit more tech know-how than Squarespace. And I run thepurposefulcreative.com on WordPress only because there are some podcasting tools that are only available via WordPress. That's why I chose WordPress for the podcast website. But really, if Squarespace had the podcasting plugins that I needed, I would have run it on Squarespace instead. I really recommend Squarespace for something that's very easy to maintain, especially if you don't want the hassle of, coding extra things or trying to learn something a little bit more complicated. So those are the 2 tools that I recommend. But if you have an e-commerce shop, if you have an online shop of any sort, the number 1 tool that I recommend for that is Shopify. I've used it for about 2 years for Rags to Riches, the social enterprise I used to work with. And it is just an amazing product. It's an amazing service that helps you run your business very smoothly. A lot of the processes become automated. A lot of the processes become so much easier with Shopify. And a lot of the big online shops that I know of use Shopify as their platform. Now, the fourth one that I recommend is investing in a Dropbox Pro account. I consider this a business expense. I have a pro account on Dropbox so that all my files are in the cloud. I save literally all of my files on Dropbox, especially because I like being mobile. I like traveling. So I like having access to my files, whether on my phone or on my laptop or on a desktop or anywhere I am in the world. So Dropbox is another business expense for me. And lastly, and probably most importantly, the thing that you need to invest in, especially when you're just starting out, is a mailing list provider. Now, I know this is not as popular of advice as, have a social media account, have a social media scheduler, but a mailing list provider for me is the number one thing you need to invest in when you've committed to your business idea. Because when you just rely on social media platforms, think about it. What if one day Instagram dies and you lose let's say you have 10,000 followers and you lose contact with all your 10,000 followers? That means all the work that you've put into Instagram just dies along with that platform, right? Or what if one day Facebook changes their Facebook page algorithm completely and now you will have to pay Facebook ads just so that the people who like your page will see what you post? What if that changes and, you have to deal with that? How then will you get in touch with your customers? And maybe you have 10,000 likes on your Facebook, but you've lost organic reach with these people. But if you have your customer's email address, and mind you, people use their email address for everything. People use their email address to sign up for apps, to sign up for lists, to sign up for websites. So the email address is not going anywhere. The email address is this generation sort of hotline to any person, right? And so having that is like having a direct contact number, direct contact line to your customer. So I really recommend collecting emails as early as possible. And there are two mailing list providers that I recommend. The first one is MailChimp. The thing that I love about MailChimp is that you can start a plan for free. So maybe you're just starting out and you want to collect emails without dishing out money first. They have a very generous free plan, so you can go and check that out. But if you are serious about it, I would recommend that you check out their paid plans as well, because there are a lot of automations that you can do that can take so much work off the table for you. Another mailing list provider that I recommend is ConvertKit, so you can check that out. Again, it's just like MailChimp, but they have their own strengths and weaknesses, and these are the things that I've tried out in the past 5 or 6 years. If you want to get links for these programs and software, please go and check out my show notes. All the links will be there. It's at thepurposefulcreative.com/episode 5. Now, those are the tools that I recommend that you invest in, especially when you're just starting out. But here's the thing. Especially if you don't have a lot of regular revenue coming in just yet, these are the only big things I would recommend that are truly worth the investment. Because what I've learned from experience is that, especially in the beginning stages, it's not so much the tools that will grow your business, but it's still about the manual labor you need to do. The first and second year, the growth driver in your business will be a lot of manual labor and figuring things out by being in the trenches and clearing out the weeds yourself. I think that it's very tempting to sort of dish out money for tools and software in the beginning, thinking that it will help you grow your business. But really, year 1 and year 2, it's a lot about the manual labor. And one thing that I'm actually pretty glad about is that I had very, very little money and capital when I was just starting out. I had no monthly salary. I was living off my savings, and that really forced me to be very smart and very critical about how I spent my money. I would really toil over every single financial decision because I knew that I didn't have a lot of money. And so everything that I spent on, I would debate about whether or not it would give me valuable growth. So not just any growth, but really, really valuable growth. Because there are two kinds of growth, especially when you're just starting out. The first one is the need to have growth. So these are things that you really need to do so that you can grow. And then the other one is nice to have growth. And these are things that you can invest in if you have regular revenue coming in. But if not, these are things that you can invest in further down the line. So I wrote a blog post if you're interested in sort of finding out how I raised money for my business, for my starting capital, as well as my trip to the United States to attend business classes. I'll link to that blog post that I wrote. I'll link that in my show notes. Here's one thing that I want to leave you with. One of the things I spent on was getting mentorship and classes. I knew that I was lacking in so many things, and one of the things that I really, really needed was guidance. I knew that no tools could help me if I didn't have a solid foundation of principles and understanding of entrepreneurship. And so I sought out mentorship. I enrolled in classes. I put myself out there, and it was such an amazing investment that paid me back 10 times, 20 times over. Having that guidance, especially in the beginning processes, was so key for me to really get a better perspective of what I was getting into and in what in the world I was doing. Plus, I was able to connect with really awesome people. So that for me was such a great investment of money and time. And then it wasn't until my business was making enough revenue on its own. And by enough, I mean, I would plot out, can this money that I have in the business cover at least 3 months of business costs in advance? That for me was my definition of enough. And once I hit that stage, that was the only time when I started considering, investing in new tools that can help grow my business in another way. Oh, and one last thing. One thing that I spend on that's not technically a tool, but a marketing cost for me would be Facebook ads. Spending on Facebook ads for me always has big returns, and that's a big topic in itself. I won't get into the nitty-gritty, but just be careful. Don't just spend carelessly on Facebook ads. Be strategic about it. All right, so that was a long answer, but hopefully that helps you sort of in your thought process about how you think about investing in your business. Be very, very smart, especially when you're just starting out. Don't just throw money around and cross your fingers and hope that it will work or it will give you the return that you need. Okay, so hopefully that answers the question neatly. Now we go on to the third question, which is all about pricing your work specifically for creatives who offer services to clients. So if you're a service-based creative, whether you're a designer or a writer or an illustrator, listen closely to this question from Ali.
Hi, I'm Ali from Tokyo, Japan. What are your tips for pricing one's work? I still feel so clueless about it even after working for quite some time. It's always a major problem point for me every time I receive new inquiries. For example, when some potential clients don't get back to me, I'm always left wondering if it's because my rate was too expensive. But conversely, there are times that I feel like I priced my work too low when I assess how much work I put into what I am working on or worked on.
Thank you for your question, Ali. Now, pricing your work is very tricky because it doesn't come with a one-size-fits-all formula. It really depends on a lot of factors, and it's difficult to give cookie-cutter advice for it. But for me, there are 3 basic things you need to consider when deciding on your pricing. First is know your audience. Second, know your competition. And third, know your costs. Now, since we're talking about a service-based business here, so maybe you're offering a design service or writing service, I know that the costs are not as clear-cut as having a business with physical products. It's hard to piece by piece figure out how much of your internet costs or laptop costs go into a single project. So let me take that off the table for now and focus on the 2 other factors. If you're your audience are small business owners, you would charge them very differently than if your audience was, let's say, university students, right? And so audience for me is a huge part of your branding. And so if you're clear on your branding, then you should know who you're talking to. And when pricing yourself, your responsibility is to really understand your audience's behaviors and their needs and their passion and pain points. I think that understanding your audience will greatly help not just your pricing, but your marketing efforts as well. So the number one thing that you need to figure out first is, who are you selling to? That's key. Now, this is also very much intertwined with the second factor, which is know your competition. So now that you know your audience, the next thing you need to figure out is, who are the other players on the playing field? And it's not so much about, just going around and seeing how everybody else prices themselves and then pricing yourself in a similar way. But what I mean by this is that figure out who your competition is. Maybe lay out a map of the different ways that, competitors would price themselves. Maybe some people would cater to a lower end market. Some people would cater to a higher end market. And then once you've mapped that out, once you have a bigger picture of who the players are and how they're positioning themselves, and then you ask yourself, how are you going to position yourself? And now there's no right or wrong way to go about it. At the end of the day, you just have to decide, how am I going to position myself? Am I going more to the lower end part of the market, or am I going to cater to a higher end part of the market? And maybe you're thinking, I don't really know how much other people are charging, especially if you're in services. You don't really know what other maybe design firms are charging. But I think that you can make an educated guess based on, their portfolio and their clients, and then how they're marketing themselves. And from there, try to make educated guesses about how they're trying to position themselves, and then how you want to position yourself in relation to everybody else. While this is not a perfect formula, this is not a direct formula, if you want to stop feeling like you're constantly clueless and you're pulling numbers out of your butt. These are sort of the 3 basic factors that you can jump off of. So know your costs, know your audience, and know your competition, so that you have a jump off point for how you can price yourself if you're offering a service. But ultimately, here is a bigger picture way of thinking about your pricing. And this might be a little bit more of an advanced method, but I do encourage you to do this because it allows you to think more long-term about your revenues instead of very short-term and project-based. So the method is to set a revenue goal for the entire year. Or if that's too broad, at least for maybe the next 6 months. I'll give you an example. So before 2016, the way that I would approach pricing myself and sort of laying out my revenue goals is that I would just think about those things whenever a project would come up. So whenever somebody inquires about a service or somebody wants to enroll in a workshop, that's the only time I would think about my goals. So I had no big picture goals. But in January of 2016, that was a year ago, I think my business was only about 2 months old back then. And I wrote down a revenue goal for the entire year of 2016. I made it a little uncomfortable for me. I made it a little bit more outside of my comfort zone. And my revenue goal was to earn at least $12,000 for the entire year. So that's about $1,000 per month. Now, for those listeners who are not from the Philippines, where I'm from, I know that this sounds like a really, really, really small number. Like you might feel like I'm setting my bar too low, but believe me, in the Philippines, $12,000 in a year is a humongous goal for someone who lives here in the Philippines, who is a creative running a small business on her own. This is already a scary goal. Just to give you some context, this goal, this $12,000 per year goal, was already more than the annual salary I was earning in my previous day job in a social enterprise. So that might give you a little bit more context about how salaries are here and what the cost of living here is. So again, $12,000 for the entire year was a scary, scary goal for me. And how I arrived at that number was I computed how much I needed to run my business each month, how much I needed to pay myself so that I can live and eat and pay my bills. I computed all of that and then came up with my goal number. It was big and scary, but I really let that be my benchmark for the year. And then once I had that big long-term goal, I worked backwards from there. I asked myself, okay, so this is what I want to earn. What then do I have to do to make that goal a reality? That's how I made plans for my business for 2016. And what happened was I ended up exceeding my revenue goal in my first year of business, which absolutely blew my mind. I ended up making about $16,000 in revenue. So that's about 750 to 760,000 pesos in Philippine pesos in 2016. And this was just my first year in business, and I really feel that I would not have gotten close to that if I didn't dare to dream big and set up a scary goal in the first place. I feel like having that goal and then working backwards from there really gave me structure and purpose to my hustle, and it wasn't just hustle for the sake of hustling. Having that big picture goal gives you a better sense of direction about how to price your work, how many clients you should aim to get the entire year, which also then gives direction for the kind of marketing and sales activities that you need to do. So it's not just, marketing and promoting in a very short-term sense. So really, the tip I have for you, Ali, is to pause and reflect about your monetary goal for the business. And this will differ for every individual, for every situation. I mean, if you're like me who does this full time, then your goal should be bigger because you need to put food on the table. But let's say you have a day job and you're doing this just to augment your income, or you're doing this on the side. You also have less hours to put in to work on it. So maybe your monetary goal for this can be a little bit smaller. Or if you're someone who is looking to eventually make the transition from corporate job to freelancer or starting your own business, maybe you want to go for a monetary goal that proves to you that you can actually pursue this full time. So maybe your goal can be a little bit higher. But you see what I mean? If you don't have a goal, if you don't have a long-term goal, then everything is relative. Everything can just be a random number you pull from thin air. Because here's the thing about making your passion sustainable or making a business out of your passion. You have to make sure your passion fits into your bigger life goals. So you can't just view your passion as sort of an addendum or a separate entity in your life. You have to make sure it fits into your bigger goals, like your financial goals. How are you going to pay rent? How are you going to buy food? How are you going to, spend for all these things? And you have to integrate your passion and your business into your bigger life plan so that you can make it sustainable. So hopefully, Ali, my answer gives you sort of a more practical way of looking at pricing as well as a more big picture way of looking at it. Okay, so let's move on to the fourth question, which is also about pricing. I actually got a lot of questions about pricing, and this one from Kat is all about how to price your product. So Ali's question previously was about how to price your work if you're offering a service. Now this question from Kat is all about pricing your product. So if you're a shop owner or maker, this will be relevant to you.
Hi, I'm Kat and I'm a bag designer. How should I price my items when I offer them online but also in bazaars? My original price point was really for online selling. At the moment, I price them the same and chalk up bazaar costs to operating expenses. My intention is I want customers to see the same price even if they go to my FB page or to my bazaar booth.
So to answer your main question, Kat, put yourself in your customer's shoes. What would it feel like if you saw a bag online and it's a certain price, and then you go to a bazaar or shop and it's a completely different price? Wouldn't that feel weird or kind of shady? Wouldn't it make you stop and question why the prices are different and it's the exact same product? As business owners, we need to be aware that there are necessary business expenses we do have to shoulder, which is why you need to be smart about how to price your product. So for example, your initial price for bag A was, let's say, bag A is $30. And for your first 6 months, that was your base introductory price, right? But as you do business, as you experience, selling that bag for the first 3 months, you realize that there are other costs that you incur that you didn't really factor into your original pricing. So for me, for example, the costs that I didn't foresee was that I had to pay transaction costs on PayPal. And then on top of that, there were conversion costs as well, which can add up over time. And so once I knew that these were things that I was incurring, these are costs that were piling up, I made sure to incorporate that into how I priced future products and just adjusting my pricing to reflect those costs. I think that the point that I'm trying to make here is that pricing is a learning process, especially when you're just starting out. You try and make the best educated guess about how to price your products. And then as you go through the experience and, see the little details you might not have predicted before, then you incorporate those learnings into the next wave of products or maybe make gradual adjustments to your pricing. Oh, and one more thing I want to add about how to price physical products, and this goes out to my listeners who are into the arts and crafts and handmade industry. If you are making the products yourself, when setting revenue goals and pricing your products, take into consideration how much time it takes to make one product. So, for example, you crochet or you hand knit scarves. Let's say that's your business, and each scarf maybe takes about 5 hours to finish. Also, you have a day job. Let's say you have a day job, which means you can only work during evenings and on Saturdays. So approximately, let's just say, for example, you have about 50 hours in a month to devote to your handmade scarf business. Now let's do a little math here. If you divide 50 hours, so you're working 50 hours a month, divided by the 5 hours needed to make one scarf, then approximately you can make 10 scarves a month. That's sort of your physical capacity of how many scarves you can physically make. Now that you have that number, review your revenue goals. Let's say your revenue goal is to earn $500 per month, and you have the physical capacity and the time to make only 10 scarves a month, then that means you need to price your scarves at $50 per piece in order to reach your revenue goals. Now that you have that number, review it. Is that competitive? Is it too high? Is it too low? From there, you can either adjust your revenue goals, adjust your price, or adjust, how many hours you work in a month so that you can produce more scarves. But yeah, that's sort of the limitation that you can hit when you're making the products yourself. There's just so much that you can make. There is just so much that is physically possible. And so I know that some of my listeners are makers and artists who might be experiencing this, which is why I wanted to discuss that. So take your physical capacity into consideration when thinking about your pricing and your goals. And for the last question, we have a question from Reese, all about how to run an online shop in a more efficient and productive manner.
Hi, I'm Reese Lansangan and I'm a singer-songwriter, and I currently launched a repackaged version of my album on my online shop, reeselansangan.com/shop. My question is, how do you develop a more efficient system of managing your online shop? So from keeping track of stocks to shipment of items to answering all queries of people who ordered. Is a weekly schedule divided into days per task advisable? And what is the best way to prevent people who order but don't pay on time? Originally, I wanted to send follow-up emails, but it can be really taxing to track and do manually. So thank you.
Thank you for your question, Reese. I know that you mentioned WooCommerce, but what I have experience with and what I really recommend for any business owner with an online shop is to use Shopify, as I mentioned earlier. What I really like about Shopify is that it's really built to make managing an e-commerce store a much, much easier experience. I think that they designed it with a shop owner in mind. And so it makes all the tasks super intuitive and easy to track. It's like having a sales employee, I promise. But I know that you're using WooCommerce, so I don't know what the back end looks like. But what I can suggest to you is something a little bit more old school. And this is another method I've had experience with. And this is for somebody who is bootstrapping things, who is doing things a little bit more scrappily. And we did this in 2012, 2013, when a bunch of friends and I decided to start selling productivity planners. We didn't invest in Shopify back then because we were just experimenting with the business idea, and what we used was good old Google Docs for the order form. And so whenever somebody would fill out an order form, it would go straight to a Google spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet was sort of like our black book. It contained all the information that we needed. And from that spreadsheet, we developed a system among the three of us who were running the business where we came up with labels and symbols on the spreadsheet so we can track, who already paid, who needed to be sent a follow-up email, and whose orders were canceled, etc., etc. I remember, I'm not sure if this is the exact way we did it, but it was something along the lines of, for example, person A would be in charge of answering all customer emails and orders every Monday and Tuesday. Then person B was gonna do that for Wednesday and Thursday, person C for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, etc. It's important that you answer customer inquiries daily as much as possible. Carve out maybe like an hour every day to do that. And then another thing that we would do back then was that we would color code the orders that were completed and shipped, and then another color for when somebody ordered but haven't paid yet, and then another color for they've already sent a follow-up email but they haven't paid yet, and stuff like that. So we created a system for ourselves. And then, if somebody didn't meet the deadline that we set, then we canceled the order and we would inform them via email. But everything we do, we tracked on that spreadsheet. We would input the date when we sent the follow-up email, the date when we shipped something, etc. Everything was recorded. Every activity that we did was recorded on that spreadsheet. Again, this is a very manual and tedious way of doing things. All these tasks are made so much simpler and more automatic on Shopify. You can send follow-up emails automatically, send an invoice automatically, etc. But again, if you're bootstrapping it, you can manually create a system on Google Sheet. It's a lot more tedious. It takes a bit of brain work to really get a system going, to get a really organized system in place, but it's a great and free place to start. Also, if you're not aware, here's one thing that might help you as well. If you're on Gmail, there's a functionality called canned responses. It's in Gmail Labs, where basically what it does is that you can save templates of emails so that you don't have to type it out one by one all the time. So maybe you can save templates for order confirmations or templates for follow-up emails or templates for shipment confirmations. That's one of the things that really helped us when we were running a business and sort of bootstrapping it all on Google Drive and Gmail. So look that up, canned responses on Gmail. That's really helpful. And that's it for the questions for this episode. I really, really enjoyed this Q&A. I love talking about business. I love talking shop. I don't know if you noticed, but I've had a lot of experience with different tools and systems in different kinds of businesses, not just for the little experiments that I've run over the past years, but also, some clients that I handled and some students that I helped out. And so I've seen a broad spectrum of people trying out different strategies, and I just love analyzing them and recommending things to people. So if you have any other questions for me or suggestions for topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, do email me at hi@thepurposefulcreative.com. Again, that's hi@thepurposefulcreative.com. I would love to hear from you. And that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it and found it valuable. If you want to hear more episodes from The Purposeful Creative, do not forget to subscribe to the show on your podcasts app if you're on iOS or on Stitcher if you're on Android. I also want to say a big thank you to all the 30 people who have left reviews for the podcast on iTunes. I swear, those reviews have been my lifeline in the past week. Thank you so much for making me smile and making all the hard work that goes into making this podcast all worth it. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for being so kind and so generous with your reviews. I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Again, this is your host, Arian Serafico, and I'll see you in the next episode of The Purposeful Creative.